All righty. We're getting into part two today on the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by our partners at FanDuel, part of the Believe Network. And what we've been doing this offseason, we've been going through and doing basically an opponent overview of all of the opponents on Notre Dame's schedule. Now, friendly reminder, this is a preview of the opponent itself. And today we're talking about the Pittsburgh Panthers, who Notre Dame will be facing. It's their 10th opponent. Now, there is not yet a kickoff time to be determined, but they are on the road against Pitt. I think they're going to be playing in the Pittsburgh Steelers home stadium like they always do when they're on the road against Pitt. But this is about the Pittsburgh Panthers specifically. It's not matchup based or how Notre Dame matches up with this unit or how this guy matches up with this guy. And Brian, this is an interesting matchup. This is one where
team.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. And we've talked about the range of what Pittsburgh could do this year, and we saw a little hint of it last year, but this is definitely going to be an interesting matchup to go on. You know, can Pat Narduzzi, an interesting head coach, can he continue building back from their spectacular 2022 season? Took a back seat in 23, had a hot start in 2024, and then the wheels fell off once Eli Holstein got hurt. Where does a guy like Pat Narduzzi stand? What is your initial thoughts around this Pittsburgh Panthers team, man?
Yeah, Trev, it's an interesting team, and I think it's a big season in my opinion for Pat Narduzzi. I think it is. I think when I look at Pat Narduzzi this season, I think of, like, who are they going to be this year? Who are they going to be? A team that kind of builds on last season, or are they going to be a team that people look at and say, okay, last year's fast start was a little fluky? Like how exactly are we going to view this Pitt team? Because it's been a really wildly up and down few years for Pat Narduzzi's team. And you look at like 2021, and I mean, that's a pretty darn good year for Pat Narduzzi and Pitt. They won the ACC, won an ACC championship that year, won 11 games, went 10-2 in the regular season that year. Ironically, lost to Western Michigan, beat Tennessee, but then lost to Western Michigan, if you remember that year. Then they go out there and lose to Miami, but then they win their last 5 games. They blow out Wake Forest and Sam Hartman in the ACC title game, win the ACC that year, beat Clemson by 10 that year, beat Virginia Tech on the road by 21, beat Georgia Tech on the road by 31. Like, that was a good football team. And you're like, okay, now what are they going to do? The next year they go out there 9-4, not quite as good, but still a good football team, scored a lot of points, beat UCLA in a high-scoring bowl game, blew out Miami blew out Virginia Tech that year, beat West Virginia that year. They did lose to Tennessee. That was a pretty good Tennessee team. If we remember that year, that Tennessee team was ranked in the top 5. Actually, that team got all the way up to number 1 at one point in time. And when then they lost to Georgia and South Carolina 2 out of 3 weeks. But, Pitt took that team to overtime, took Tennessee to overtime, lost to Georgia Tech in a close game, lost at Louisville, lost at North Carolina, but also still had plenty of good wins that year, 9-4. And then you go into 2023 and just the bottom fell out. And they go 3-9. So then the question last year was, okay, was that just an anomaly season, or is Pitt going to struggle in this new era of NIL and open portal systems and all that? Because 7 years ago, Jordan Addison's on the team in 2023. He's not at USC. And 2022 was the year that Jordan Addison, it was 22, and then he went to USC in 20. No. He was stud at Pitt in 21.
Yep.
And then transferred to USC in 22. Like, that doesn't happen in 2022. So that year they go 9-4. They probably have Jared Wayne, who was a 1,000-yard receiver, and Jordan Addison on that team. And you just kind of been through this where they'd have some players do well and then leave. So last year was going to be a big test to tell us, okay, do they turn it around? And they started off great, 7-0. Had some good wins. Beat West Virginia last year, had a nice tough road win over Cincinnati, beat North Carolina on the road by 10, had a blowout win over Syracuse. I think that was like a Thursday night game, I think is what it was. And Syracuse is on fire, and they steamrolled Syracuse. And I think they had like 2 pick sixes in the first half, just dominated Syracuse. And you're like, all right, Pitt's doing good. And then they didn't win another game the rest of the year. Some of them you get, Trev, like they lost at SMU. All right, okay, I get it. They were blown out. That wasn't good, but you expected a loss. They lost at home to Clemson in a hard-fought game, really hard-fought game. And Cade Klubnik has that walk-off, not walk-off technically, but kind of. It was like last minute of the game, walk-off long touchdown run. All right, no disrespect. No, it's no shame losing in a close game to Clemson. But then they lose at home to Virginia. They get blown out at Louisville, lose by 11 at Boston College, and then to make matters worse, you got beat by Toledo in a bowl game. So the question now is, was it the beginning of the year that was the fluky part, or was it the second half of the year that was the fluky part? Because in the last 2 years, you had that little stretch of 7 wins, but before that and after that, you've gone 3-16. I think that's what this season is about Pat Narduzzi is the 3-9 is behind us. Last year, there was legitimate reasons why we struggled down the stretch. Not saying it's acceptable, but it's understandable. But we're going to be this team. And that's going to be the question that this Pitt team is going to answer, because they've got some pieces coming back, Trev, on both sides of the ball, to where this should be a good football team.
Should be.
Will they be?
Exactly.
Will they be?
Who's the real Pitt? Was it the 7-0 that started out in 2024? Was it the 3-9 in 2023? Was it their record outside of that 7-0 stretch? Is it somewhere in between? That's what I think makes this team so interesting, because I do think it is a question mark as to who does Pat Narduzzi have at his disposal. Was their downfall in 2024 really just because of Eli Holstein? And it could have been. I'm not going to overlook that as just a non-factor, but that was the only thing. Right.
He did play against Virginia and SMU and Virginia.
He did.
Yeah,
he did. And that's what's interesting about him. His first 5 games of the year, he started out with 3 touchdown passes in every one of those games. That is one of very few quarterbacks. Quinn Ewers didn't do that. Drew Aller didn't do that.
15 touchdowns and 3 picks in the first 5 games. Yep. Over 300 yards in 4 of those 5 games.
Will Howard didn't do that. Carson Beck didn't do that. It's him and Cam Ward off the top of my mind were players at the P4 level that were able to accomplish that. However, the last 5 games, he had 2. So that's what makes Eli Holstein interesting. Now, was it a situation where the injury was just he was never fully over it, he was never fully healthy again, or did the level of competition step up? Because then you start looking at the teams that he did that against. Yes, he had 15 touchdown passes in his first 5 games, only 3 interceptions to your point. That was against Kent State. We know how they did last year. On the road against Cincinnati, home against West Virginia. In a rivalry game, that's a good performance. Then Youngstown State on the road against North Carolina. And then once you hit Cal, the wheels kind of started to fall off a little bit for him, even in the games that he was able to perform the entire game. So it's going to be interesting. But Brian, to your point,
yeah, that's a great point, though, Trev. Like the Cal game is when it started going down, and it never recovered. Mm-hmm. Even the SMU game where he threw for 248 yards, he did that on 48 attempts.
Yep.
And in the first 5 games, 15 touchdowns, 3 picks. In the last 4 games that he played, 2 touchdowns and 3 picks.
Mm-hmm.
And he was, in the 50%, around 50 plus, a little over 50% completion rate. But like when you look at this team, that's part of it. So you can't put all of it on him. Your defense struggled. Mm-hmm. Your offensive line was inconsistent.
Yep.
Like the point of this team is they were 2 different teams beginning of the season and end of the season. And really in all phases of the game, that you can't then say, well, this is about the quarterback going down, because it's the same story of the defense. And the defense down the stretch was bad. And they just weren't good. And you give up 5.8 yards per play and 431 yards to Toledo, 48 points to Toledo. That has nothing to do with Eli Holstein being injured. Nothing. You getting worked by Boston College, who went for 5.9 yards per play and scored 34 points. It's nothing to do with Eli Holstein. You giving up 6.9 yards per play and allowing Louisville to go for over 200 and rushing and 200 in passing and over 500 yards total offense has nothing to do with Eli Holstein going down. So, like, those are the things is, like, as a head coach, you've got to be able to rally a game. And I don't care, Eli Holstein or not, you had a better roster than Virginia. at home and you got beat. Like, just win that one game and then beat Toledo in a bowl game, and we're having a very different like, I'm not clowning them for losing to a MAC team, because the MAC team they lost to by 2 is better than the MAC team that beat Notre Dame.
Yeah.
I'm simply making the point that that's the kind of game you got to win when you're Pitt in the postseason. And if you win that game and you beat a 5-7 Virginia team home, who's only 5-7 because they beat you, we're talking about a 9-4 team, and we're having a completely different conversation about Pitt. We're talking about Pitt as a legit title contender in the ACC. Like Trev, I know you've got the odds. I'll let you talk about it, but like, if Pitt would have just simply beat Virginia at home and beat Toledo in the bowl game, I think the conversation and the odds of them and how they're viewed as a potential ACC title contender look very different. And you can't blame not having Eli Holstein on losing to Virginia at home and losing to Toledo in a bowl game where you gave up 48 points.
No, it is an interesting spot where they're at. This team and how they performed in 2024 kind of reminds me of how Notre Dame started out in 2014. I know this is just about Pitt, but it's, that Notre Dame team started out really hot and they looked unstoppable. They worked their way back up into the rankings, and they were, quarterback was putting up some gaudy numbers. And then some stuff happened down the stretch where the wheels completely fell off. What type of response does Pitt have this season? Does it turn into Notre Dame 2015, or do they look like Pitt in 2024? But this is a team that is getting, I believe, slept on a little bit in the ACC. There's a lot that they have to go out and show, but right now Pitt has the 8th best odds, according to FanDuel, to win the ACC. They're at plus 4,200 odds. That is an interesting dynamic. Yes, I know the ACC is more along the lines of like the Big 12, where there's, outside of Clemson, there's not really that like elite team. There's some like good middle of the road talent, but, Pitt has less odds, less favorable odds, kind of by a lot, plus 1,100 odds to be exactly, according to FanDuel, to win the ACC than Florida State.
Yeah.
A team that just went 2-10.
Yeah.
Florida State, Pitt is closer in odds to winning the ACC to NC State than they are Florida State.
They're closer to North Carolina than they are Duke.
Yeah.
Actually, yeah, because I was looking this up. Like, it's actually kind of interesting. Let me look at this up again, Trev, because I saw some of these things and I was like, wow, that's interesting. So you mentioned that you mentioned the pull this up here real quick. So I saw so Duke is, what do we say? Duke is plus 2,700 and Pittsburgh's plus 4,200. So Pittsburgh at 4,200, they're closer to Virginia Tech, who is 12th, than they are Duke, who is got the 6th best odds. They're not even sniffing Georgia Tech right now.
No.
And that's who's at plus 1,400. Pitt should never be that far away from Georgia Tech, who I like as a program. It's not so much a criticism of Georgia Tech, but just Pitt should be better. Pitt should not be going into a season where they have significantly worse odds to win the ACC than Duke. I don't care how good Duke's coaching is. You're Pitt. You should be better. And so I think that honestly, the way they finished the season and the fact that they're coming off of a 3-9, look, last 2 years, Pitt's gone 10-15. That's a reality. You've got a chance to turn this around, and I think this is a big year. I'm gonna go out as long and say if Pitt doesn't turn it around this year, that means 8 wins or more in the regular season. I think you've got to ask yourself, has Pat Narduzzi taken us as far as he's taken us?
No, that's
where you got to decide either A, we're going in a different direction, or B, you got to sit down and have a come to Jesus conversation with him and he with you about, if you want me to compete at a greater level, this is the support I need. And then they say to him, okay, if we're going to give you that, then these are the expectations we're going to have for you. I think they need to have that conversation this offseason regardless, but it's especially important if he doesn't win at least 8 games, in my opinion. Because otherwise, you're not that coach that won 20 games in 2 years. You're the coach who benefited from Clemson being down for a couple years.
Yep.
And then once Clemson got good and SMU joined the league and Louisville hired a competent coach, you all of a sudden fell back down in the middle of the pack in a pretty mediocre overall league. It's
Mm-hmm.
especially bad to be that low in this league.
Yep. Agreed. Well, to your point about the results that Pat Narduzzi needs to produce, let's kind of dive into this thing. I think a big factor is a lot of the talent that he brings back on both sides of the ball. Let's start on offense. Don't want to regurgitate too much, but we spent a lot of time talking about Eli Holstein. Last year, he was he a redshirt freshman last year?
Yes.
Last year was a redshirt freshman, hot start to the season. Unfortunately, partially due to injury, maybe not back fully healthy, we didn't get to see what he was able to do against some of the better competition.
Also first year at Pitt, because he transferred from Bama. So even though he was a redshirt freshman, he wasn't in year 2 of a system. It was year 1 overall in a new system. They were all in a new system, but first year at Pitt.
That's right. So what type of player, what version of Eli Holstein is Pitt and Pat Narduzzi going to get this year, now that he's fully healthy and going into year 2 of an offensive system? So that's a different aspect of the talent that they bring back. But one of the players and one of the reasons why we are higher on Pitt this year and why Pat Narduzzi kind of has less excuses because of the running back that they're bringing back.
Yeah. This is one of my favorite players to watch in college football, Trev. Des Reed is an outstanding player. And honestly, the other thing, it's for me, it's not just Desmond Ridder. There's kind of a couple aspects that have me excited about this. It's Desmond Ridder with Eli Holstein in year 2 of Cade Bell's system. And that's a big thing for me, because it's one thing to, have some success. It's another thing to say, hey man, like we were in a system where, like, when we were healthy, we were scoring some points. I mean, we were putting some points on the board. I mean, you look at 55 in the opener, 28 against Cincinnati, 38 against West Virginia, 73 against Youngstown, 34 against North Carolina, 41 against Syracuse. They had a bad day against Cal, but you could have, up to that point in time, you could have just chalked that up to they had an off day. And honestly, from at that point in time, it made sense. I mean, you could buy it. Like, yeah, they just had an off day. I mean, other than that, they've been pretty good, but when you start getting into some of the other stuff and you start looking into, okay, like, all right, I kind of think this team, this team outside of that, this team's rolling. They got receivers making plays, or quarterbacks balling, Des Reed is balling. And then obviously they fell apart late in the year, but I don't think it's the system so much as they had some question marks. But now you're going into year 2 with Cade Bell. Same quarterback coming back, Des Reed coming back. Like, they should be a lot better. Two of your 3 top receivers coming back. But what's so great about Des Reed, Trev, is he gives you an ability to impact the game in every facet possible. You get him the ball in the run game. I mean, he rushed for just a shade under 1,000 yards last season. I think if the offensive line was better and they had any kind of passing threat late in the year, I think he gets over 1,000 last season, went for 5.3 per carry. He missed 2 games also. He didn't play against Youngstown State, didn't play against BC. But he's not a guy that you're going to give the ball to 20 times a game a bunch. They gave him the ball 33 times against Toledo because they had no other game after that. But he's also a kid that caught 52 passes for 579 yards. So with Des Reed, when you're comparing him to other running backs nationally, you just can't stack up rushing yards. You have to look at total offense.
Yeah.
And when you look at his total numbers on offense last year, 1,545 yards from scrimmage, 6.5 yards per play last season, and he had 9 offensive touchdowns, also averaged over 12 yards per punt return, and had a punt return for a score last year. Like, this is one of those kids that every time he touches the ball, you're like, this might go. And when you have a kid like that to build your system around, and now Cade Bell has a much better understanding of what he's good at and what maybe he isn't as good at, now is when you're really going to see him become that chess piece. But the other thing too, Trev, he's not a just stop Dez and Pitt's got nothing. I mean, that's the thing. When you look at this team, they got 2 of their best receivers coming back this season. They've got more than just Des Reed, and that's why I think this Pitt offense now in year 2 of Cade Bell has a chance to look consistently more like the team we saw the first 7 games and in the bowl game, and less like the team we saw during that really rough late season stretch without Eli Holstein.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're talking about a running back in Des Reed that was tied for first on the team in receptions. As a running back, he averaged 11.1 yards per catch as a running back. I mean, those are some good numbers, man. You add on top of that 4 receiving touchdowns to go with his 5 rushing touchdowns. It's fantastic. But to your point about the receiving core, you look at who they bring back. They have Kenny Johnson coming back, a 6'1", 200-pound kid, 46 receptions last year, 537 yards, 3 touchdowns. They have Raphael Williams coming back. He's 5'10", 165, a little bit more of a shifty guy. But he still had 37 receptions last year, 426 yards, 6 touchdowns. So they have good production coming back from the receiving core. Another player that I'm going to be interested to see is they brought in a transfer portal back with how much they like to throw to their running backs. They brought in Justin Cook, who played at East Stroudsburg. It's a D2 college, but he was a wide receiver at that level, and they moved him to running back. But during his time at that college, he had 2,400 total yards of offense and 26 touchdowns combined. And so I think that is going to be, I think, an interesting dynamic to what he brings to the table for them. So I'll be interested to see what Justin Cook does with that team as well.
And I remember when we were talking about best receivers that Notre Dame is going to face this year, you were you talked about Kenny Johnson. You really like Kenny Johnson. When actually it wasn't even then. It was we were doing our all opponent team.
Yep.
And you talked about, I don't think you had him on your first or second team, but you talked about like he was a guy that I considered on my first or second team. So to your point, Trev, there's some weapons there. And then, like you also said, they brought in some players as well. Derek Davis is a good player. He's back, from last year. So this is a team. The key, however, here's the key, Trev. I didn't think their offensive line was very good last year.
No.
And they lost 3 starters. And so you've got, 2 portal players coming in, should expected to start on the left side of your offensive line. I just they lost 2 starters in their offensive line. Their center and right side are coming back. They lost their left guard, left tackle. And you got a transfer from Michigan coming in at left tackle. Got a transfer from Charlotte coming in that's expected to start at left guard. They're going to need those guys to get caught up to speed in a hurry. That's going to be the thing that's going to make or break this offense this season. Can the offensive line do a better job protecting Eli Holstein, which they didn't always do a very good job of last year, even before the injuries? And can they do a better job of opening up run lanes? I mean, and with Des Reed and the backs they have, y'all don't have, this doesn't have to be 2017 Notre Dame. You don't got to be opening up holes that you can drive a car through. You just need open up holes that are as wide as Desmond Reed's body. Because if you can do that, just get a body on a body, he's going to do something with it. But the big thing is going to be consistency there, but you've got to do a better job of protecting your quarterback. You gave up 43 sacks last year. Here's a crazy stat for you, Trev. Last year, Pitt in college football, last season, their defense ranked 6th in college football in sacks per game and ranked 10th in total sacks last season. It's very good. They gave up more sacks than they made last year. They got to get way better up front. If they're just solid, and that's all they need, just be solid on the O-line, this Pitt offense is going to be very good, and this Pitt team will have a chance to win at least 1 or 2 more games than they did last season, at least. Against what we'll show you when we break it down is a pretty challenging schedule, pretty challenging ACC schedule, especially when you look at their non-conference.
I'll say this. I put a lot of weight into offensive lines that return experience. The caveat to that is when your offensive line ranked 126 in the country last year in sacks allowed, and you return 3 of those starters. So that's kind of the balance. I'm totally on board with you. It's like what we talk about with Notre Dame all the time. This offense can't be what we believe that it can be unless the issues on the offensive line get shored up. But Brian, as you know, the offensive line is not the only thing that kind of has to get turned around with Pitt. There's a lot of things on their defense that are going to be interesting. Now, when we do talk about Pitt's defense, this is the interesting piece with them. Big picture, they have to get better. Last couple of years, their defense hasn't been great.
Surprising, because that's been Pat Narduzzi's that's his baby. That's like Marcus Freeman not having a good defense. It's like, really? How's that happen?
That's what's interesting, because the first thing that people might look at is, well, maybe they don't have the talent. And their front 7 is extremely talented.
Yeah.
And so that's what makes the conversation around Pitt's defense that much more interesting.
I think you could make a case that they didn't have real good talent in the secondary, and we'll talk about that. But
Yes.
their front seven talent's pretty good. And you could make a case, honestly, Trev, going into the season that Pitt has the best linebacker room in college football coming back.
Yeah.
And it's not just like when you look at their numbers last year, Kyle Lewis, who's a preseason first-team All-American, finished last season with he had 15 and a half tackles for loss. He also had 7 sacks. He had 101 tackles. Now, yes, he had more assisted tackles and solos, but when you break down their film, his assisted tackles are like legit assisted tackles. Like he's around the ball a lot. He had 7 sacks, which is good, but he had 15 and a half tackles for loss. That means 8.5 of his tackles for loss were run plays, were not pass rushes. And you talk about a guy that also had 3 pass breakups and 4 interceptions. This is a kid that impacts the game as a pass rusher, as a cover player, and as a run defender. And he's an outstanding college football player. I don't know what kind of NFL prospect he's going to be. I'm not an NFL draft guy. He's only 6 foot. He's only 225, maybe 225. I mean, he's listed at 225. I don't know if he is. I don't care about all that. As a college football player, this kid is big time and is without a doubt one of the best. I mean, and when I say one of the best, I don't just mean what he does at Pitt. I mean, you put this kid on just about every linebacker room in college football, and he's starting for you, and he's one of your better players. Like, I think he's an outstanding football player. But he's not alone. This isn't just about him. Rasheem Biles last year had 82 tackles, 14 and a half tackles for loss, and 5.5 sacks. He had 9 pass breakups and 1 interception. Between the two of them, they had 17 passes defensed. They had 12.5 sacks. Big-time impact in the pass game. But and I talked how Lewis had 8.5 run game stops. Rasheem Biles had 9. So over 17 run game stops behind the line of scrimmage. These are in, again, he's a smaller guy, 6'1", 215. That's his listed weight. But they can fly. They're legitimate, like big time athletes for college linebackers. They're smart, they're instinctive. They both have to do a better job of getting off blocks when teams can run right at them. And that's what teams have had success with last year, is running right at them. But some teams, I should say, had some success running right at them. I shouldn't say everyone did. But, man, Trev, these two guys are impact players. And Braylon Lovelace, who also comes back, he's their starting middle linebacker. He's the bigger guy at 6'2", 225. He had 53 tackles last year, but he had 10.5 tackles for loss and 4 sacks. Also had an interception.
In their front seven, they had 4 guys go over double-digit tackles for a loss last year, and they all come back to this year's defense. The talent in the front seven is there, between the linebackers that you listed off, as well as Jimmy Scott, who had 12.5 tackles for a loss last year and was second on the team in sacks with 6.5. He comes back as an edge player for them as well. So the front seven for Pitt, I am totally on board with you. That linebacker unit is nice.
Yeah.
Like you can make the argument to stack them up against any unit in the country. And I mean that legitimately.
Yep.
It's a good group of guys.
And their run defense last year statistically was very good. 112.8 yards per game, only 3.1 yards per carry. It's outstanding. But as I said, there was a couple teams that were able to go right at them. West Virginia went right at them, ran for $188. Louisville ran it right down their throat with mid-zone, outside zone, inside zone, and just ran right at them, went for 212 yards, just ran it down their throat. And that's an area where they're going to have to get better. Virginia ran the ball relatively well on them. SMU ran the ball, gashed them with the run game. They've got to improve their run defense, but I think part of that is they couldn't really use their safeties to protect the run game because of how bad they were protecting the quarterback, their lack of size. But I also think, there were some moments where they looked great in the run game last season. I mean, they held Syracuse to 6 yards on 29 carries. I know Syracuse doesn't like to run a whole lot, but 6 yards on 29 carries is a pretty good day of work. I don't care who you're playing. They had some moments where they were solid, but that's an area where they're going to have to get better, is defending the run, just a little bit more consistent. But overall, the big weakness for them is they couldn't stop anybody from throwing the football. I mean, their pass defense, Trev, last season was atrocious. I'm pulling up now. I think they were in the 120s in pass defense last year. They were, let's see here. Where was Pitt? They were 123rd last season in yards allowed. They gave up 22 touchdowns last season, allowed almost 60% in last year in completion percentage. They ranked 62nd in quarterback rating. They ranked 66th in yards allowed per attempt. And there's not a statistic you look at. The best ranking they had is they were 49th in yards allowed in completion percentage allowed. So that's an area where, and that they did all that despite being a top 10 team in sacks. So basically, when the quarterback wasn't getting put on the ground, he was tearing them up. And that's something that's going to have to get a lot better for them, Trev. And if you look at their numbers and you really dive into it, they dominated Kent State's pass offense. They went 14 of 28, only 181 yards. They shut them down. They shut down Virginia's terrible pass offense. They held West Virginia only 210. They held Youngstown State to 236, 238. So it's like, yeah, it's even worse when you kind of take some put some context in it, and it gets even worse. If you look at what they were in yards allowed per game against Power 5 teams only, like, we're 98th, still pretty bad. When you look at, because you take out some of the Pitt, you look at what they were quarterback rating, they're 48th. So it was not good all around. And the reason it looks that good is because they give up 351 to Toledo in the bowl game. So yeah, it's going to last 4 games. They gave up 288, 293, 253, and 351. They also gave up 321 to Syracuse, which you can respect that. They throw the ball a ton. Syracuse got 321. They threw the ball 64 times. Overall, Pitt, that was actually one of Pitt's
that's
best
actually
days.
pretty decent.
They had 5 picks in that game. Like, but they had 13 picks. Yeah, 5 of them came in one game. 2 others came against Youngstown State. In the last 6 games, they gave up 11 touchdowns, only had 3 picks. So after the Syracuse game, they gave up 306 yards to SMU, 9.9 yards per attempt. Louisville went for 293, but averaged 10.5 per attempt. BC went for 253, 9 yards an attempt. Like, their pass defense has got to get way better. And you can't say get after the quarterback, because there aren't many teams that get after the quarterback better than Pitt does. You couldn't cover.
Yeah. Specifically, the secondary has to get better. I'm with you. Pass defense as a whole, but it's not a great sign. For as much as we raved about their linebackers, it's not great that your team leader in interceptions was a linebacker and your team leader in passes defended was also a linebacker.
Because they're really good at coverage.
Yeah, and it wasn't the same linebacker. And so when you're relying on your 6'2" and 6 foot tall linebackers to be your best coverage guys, as well as your most effective coverage guys, as well as your most effective run defenders, you're putting a lot on the plate of these 2 guys here.
Trev, we're always complaining about how Notre Dame's linebackers don't get any picks. Like, they had 4 different linebackers pick a pass off last year.
Yeah.
Like, last year, Pitt only had 13 interceptions in 13 games. See, 4, 5, 6, 7 of those interceptions were from linebackers. Over half of their interceptions were from their linebackers. Their DBs only produced 6.
Yeah.
Notre Dame, for example, has had a guy that gets 6 at like each of the last 2 years. It's had one guy get at least 6 in Xavier Watts. So the secondary it's a problem. Now, they brought in four transfer players out of the portal, which is needed. And I would argue that they lost their best DB in Donovan McMillan. But it's not saying a whole lot, but they're going to need Rashad Battle's a good player at times, but they're going to need a lot better play from that unit, and they're going to need their transfers to push. Definitely going to need them to push.
Absolutely agree. Well, let's dive into some of the competition that they're going to be facing this upcoming season, Brian.
Prediction time is always fun, Trev, because you get to talk about like a lot of the other teams and then go through their schedule and who they face, because that's going to have such a factor in who these teams play, Trev. And when I look at this Pitt team as I'm studying them, I got to say, this is for a team like Pitt, I think this is a pretty challenging schedule.
Yeah,
I do. I like this schedule. So meaning it's one that if they are good, they will have earned it. If they're not good, then you're like, okay, you can't compete with those good teams. But first of all, big picture, Trev, I would argue that the 4 best teams they play, just my opinion, 4 best teams they play, they get them all at home.
Yep.
That's Louisville, NC State, Notre Dame, and Miami. They get them all at home. I think that's, at times I've said that's not good because you're playing teams you have no shot to beat.
Mm-hmm.
In Pitt's case, I don't think that's true for any of those teams. I mean, it's unlikely they beat Notre Dame, but it's not an impossible game for them.
Nope.
We've seen Pitt teams with less talent than this one beat or play tight with some good Notre Dame teams over the years. So I think in this case, I think it's actually good for them that they get those teams at home. Their road slate is still, I mean, at West Virginia, at Florida State, at Syracuse, at Stanford, at Georgia Tech. You could argue that Georgia Tech's a team that belongs in that top 4. And then it'd be 3 or 4. That's arguable for sure. But I think overall, Trev, when you look at the schedule, a 9-win Louisville team, a West Virginia team that I think is going to be dangerous this year, a BC team that is going to be better this year. You know, I think you're looking at this team and saying, hey, I think this team faces a really good schedule. And if they can win 8+ games, they will have earned it. And it'll be a great sign that this program's turning things around. So when you look at their schedule, Trev, that's my takeaway. I was curious kind of what you think about this Pitt schedule.
Yeah, the success of Pittsburgh this year will be made by how they perform on the road. And that's kind of what it was last season as well. You go and you look, and even when they were going on their run last year in 2024, you go and you look at what Pittsburgh was doing on the road, and it wasn't great. Yes, they got a win in week 2 on the road against Cincinnati. They beat Cincinnati 28-27. And it's not like Cincinnati last year was a wagon. You know, you go through and you look at what they did against North Carolina on the road. Decent win, 10-point win, 34-24. You lose to SMU on the road. You lose to Louisville on the road. Pitt was not that great away from home last year. So their schedule, when I look at it, is going to be made, or you're not going to hold serve at home. You're not going to be able to go 7-0 at home with Notre Dame, Miami, Boston College, Louisville. But you go and you look at your road opponents. At West Virginia, it's a rivalry game. West Virginia has a first-time not first time, but a new head coach this year, going into year 1 of the Rich Rod tenure. How will they be? I think in a couple of years, this could be a vintage West Virginia team if Rich Rod kind of gets his feet under him and is able to do it. But year 1, it's up for debate. Florida State, who knows how they're going to be? I couldn't tell you. Part of me wishes that Florida State was on Notre Dame's schedule this year just so we could try to break them down and do what we've done with, all the other opponents. But Florida State, couldn't tell you. At Syracuse, it's another one. Last year, it was a lot of, the high-powered offense. It did all that. Well, Pitt was able to beat that team last year, and they lost a lot from what was on that roster. How's Syracuse going to be, though? Another question, don't know. Stanford, I think we're all kind of general consensus. They're not going to be that good this year. You look at the roster, you look at all the stuff going on Backhouse, that's going to be a mess. And then at Georgia Tech. If Pitt can find some way to go 3-2, 4-1 in their road games this year, I think that's going to hold the key to success of their schedule, truthfully.
I just wish that Duquesne would have played Pitt when I was coaching at Duquesne. Like, that'd have been pretty cool. Like,
that'd have been sweet.
That'd have been pretty sweet. I look at this team, Trev. You didn't give your record prediction, right? We're just still talking through the schedule. Yep. I think when I look at Pitt, I think you're spot on. It's going to be hard to hold serve at home. But you've got the more of those games you can win, the better. When you look at Louisville, BC, NC State, Notre Dame, and Miami, if you can go 3-2 in those games, you've got a shot to get to that 8-win mark that we talked about. If you go 2-3 against those teams, then it's going to be really hard for you to be better than you were last year, just 7-5. Because now you can only afford to lose one game against West Virginia, Florida State, Syracuse, Stanford, and Georgia Tech on the road, which is going to be really hard. An ideal scenario for Pitt, in my opinion, is minimum 8-4 record. That means you can afford 2 at home, but you can't go any more than that. Because now when you look at West Virginia, at Florida State, at Syracuse, at Stanford, at Georgia Tech, well, it's a lot easier for me to envision them going 3-2 in those games than 4-1 in those road games. If you are able to really do well at home and only lose to 1, let's say you beat Notre Dame and lose Miami, or lose to Notre Dame and beat Miami, or then you have a much better shot because now you can sustain one more road win. But I think this is my point. After the first two games, which should both be wins, with all due respect to the Dukes, you're talking about West Virginia, Louisville, Boston College, Florida State, Syracuse, NC State, Stanford, Notre Dame, Virginia, Georgia Tech, and Miami. So of those 10 games, 8 of those 10 teams made a bowl game last year. And one of those two teams that didn't make a bowl game is Florida State. So when I look at that, that's a challenging schedule. Pitt will, if they win 8-9 games, they will have earned those 8-9 wins, in my opinion, this year, Trev. Because I do think this is, and it's a nice blend of you're not dominant at home or dominant on the road as far as tough games. It's a nice blend. You got some challenging road games. You got some challenging home games. You got to be able to beat some teams that maybe are on your level talent-wise or maybe even a little bit better. And that's what I don't know that Pat Narduzzi can do, unfortunately. I don't know that he can win those games with consistency because he hasn't really done it since 2021. But that's what's in front of him this season. So that's my breakdown of Pitt. You ready to go through it and make our predictions, Trev, as we wrap this up with some predictions?
I am. Let's do it, man.
All right, I'll let you go first.
So when I look at this Pitt schedule, you guys know I've been pretty consistent with I'm pretty high on this Pitt team this year. I like Eli Holstein. I like the talent at some of the skill positions that they have. A little bit higher on their receiving core than some. Brian and I talked about that today. Love their linebacking core. I have Pitt finishing the regular season at 8-4. I have them losing to Louisville. I have them losing on the road at Florida State. I have them losing to Notre Dame, and I have them losing on the road against Georgia Tech. So I have a team that has some tough losses in there, but I also have them beating Syracuse on the road, a much improved, what we believe to be a feisty Boston College team, an NC State team that we also have, like they're the team that we picked for Notre Dame to be on upset alert on. And then I have them beating Miami at the end of the year. Let me explain. I don't think it's because the talent on Miami's roster is bad. And it's not because I'm down on Miami as much as what this prediction may lead to think. But you go and you look at the end of Miami's schedule. We're talking about a team that doesn't leave the state of Florida until November 1st. And then you wrap up the season without bye weeks, back-to-back road games on the road against Virginia Tech and on the road against Pitt at the end of November.
At Pitt right after Thanksgiving in the cold. As someone who lived in Pittsburgh when I coached because Duquesne is in Pittsburgh and I live there, it gets cold in November.
Yeah.
November, brother.
Yeah. And so that's more of the factor. I mean, you look at, Miami's schedule in the month of November without a bye week at SMU, home against Syracuse, home against NC State, at Virginia Tech, at Pitt. And so Pitt is going to get the benefit of the doubt of getting a team that 4 straight weeks without a bye. You play every single weekend in the month of November and you get them at home. And I think that's going to kind of be that win that kind of propels Pitt forward a little bit. You go into bowl season, you get away with a 9-4 win, kind of like what Brian was talking about. If Pitt was able to kind of piece it together and beat Toledo in a bowl game and use that to kind of propel them into the 25 season, we'd have a much different tune about Pitt going into this year. I think it's a year removed, and I think that Pitt is going to do what we thought they were going to do last year, this year, but based on the timing of their losses, I don't know if they're ever going to climb above like the 20th ranked team in the country. But they're going to be a very underrated team when they host Notre Dame on November 15th. So I've picked going 8-4, losses to Louisville, Florida State on the road, Notre Dame, and Georgia Tech on the road.
So right now where I'm at with Pitt, Trev, is I see a team that loses the games I'm most confident they lose right now is Notre Dame at home and Georgia Tech on the road. Those are the two right now that I'm most confident that they lose because I think those teams are just bad matchups for Pitt and arguably the two most talented offenses they're going to face. Then I have them either Louisville or NC State at home. I see them potentially dropping one of those two games. And you can look at Miami. Like one of those three teams, they'll lose to at home. Then on the road, I think that the game that right now I would say after that I'm most confident that they're going to struggle to win is actually at Florida State. But it's hard to say that for sure because we don't know what Florida State's going to be. But I think that's a matchup where what I do know about Florida State is I think it could present some problems to them. There's really three games that to me they're going to determine their season. Are they a 6-6, 7-5 team, or are they an 8-4, 9-3 team? The first one is going to be the West Virginia game, because I think West Virginia might be dangerous in November, but Pitt gets them September 13th. And you're talking about a team with a brand new coaching staff, implementing a brand new system with basically a brand new roster. It's not like Purdue levels of rebuilding, but it's not that far off. They're closer to Pitt. They're closer to Purdue than they are like Ohio State, Notre Dame, Georgia in terms of the number of portal players they're bringing in. It was funny. You look at our lads, depth charts, and I'm looking at Lindy's, I'm looking at Athlon and all this. But I like looking at our lads because they put transfers in orange. And you look at West Virginia's roster, and they've got 5 orange players on offense in the starting lineup and 7 on defense. But in the 2 deep, all but 2 players, and they're both on defense, in the 2 deep, on offense and defense combined, are not transfers. So way more transfers in the 2 deep, according to them, than returning players. You're getting them at the right time. Yes, it's on the road, and yes, Rich Rod's a very good coach, but you're getting West Virginia at the right time. You've got to win that game. And then the other one for me is you've got to, I think you've got to be able to go on the road and beat Syracuse. That's a big one for me. You've got to win that game. And then the last one is obviously at home against Miami. I think that's going to be a big one as well. So I look at those games, Trev. That's how I feel about it. Right now, I have Pitt at 8-4. Same reason you do, losing to some combination of 4 of the teams that I talked about. But I'm right now with the feeling I have about their offensive line and the question marks I have about their secondary. If I had to say, if I'm going to be wrong, I think I'm going to be wrong more on the 6-6 side than I am on the 9-3, 10-2 bounce back, because they got to prove to me that when they played Louisville last year, it wasn't even competitive, Trev. It wasn't competitive.
No.
BC thoroughly outplayed them last year. Now, it was at BC. You get them at home this year. You've got to win that game. Mm-hmm. But you went to Louisville last year and got destroyed. Now, that doesn't always mean you're going to get beat this year. What I'm saying is there's a big gap you got to close there. And Louisville will be a more talented team. And the thing is, Louisville can run the ball on you, but Louisville's got receivers that you're going to have a hard time covering. Mm-hmm. And that's my concern about Florida State as well. It's my concern with them at home against NC State. And it's my concern with them against Miami as well, on top of Georgia Tech and Notre Dame. So they've got to answer those O-line DB questions before I can confidently say, yeah, I love my 8-4 pick, and I could see them maybe winning 9 or 10. Right now, that's not where I'm at. I think if everything goes right, they could be a 9-10 win team. But right now, I'm at 8-4. But if I'm wrong, I think I'm going to be wrong on that they're not going to be as good as I have them. That's where I'm at right now.
I'm with you. And that's what's so interesting about this Pittsburgh team, man, is when we're talking about a team whose range is 6-6 to 9-3, maybe even 10-2, depending on how because right now I have them chalked up to a loss at Florida State. But again, that's a team that went 2-10 last year. I doubt they go 2-10 again, or even anywhere close. I don't think Florida State goes 9-3. I think they have a bounce back year, but again, what is that going to look like for
I think they're at least a bowl team, don't you, Trev?
6-6, yeah.
State. At least they're a bowl team.
Yeah.
And they'll be athletic.
Mm-hmm.
That's, for the most part, that's the 2 things we can say. I feel at least confident saying that about them.
Mm-hmm. But that's what makes this schedule for Pitt so interesting. That's what makes Pittsburgh as a team this interesting. But folks, that's going to do it for us today here on the Irish Breakdown podcast. So we talked about.
That was fun, Trev. I got to vent for an hour. We got to break down Pitt for a little bit. We're 2 games left. By the way, we're gonna finish all the opponents this week. We're gonna do Syracuse on Thursday, and then we're gonna do Stanford on Friday before the mailbag. So we're gonna knock those all out, because next week, Trev, we start getting into our predictions. We're gonna do our ACC, Big Ten, SEC, and Big 12 predictions next week. And then next Saturday, so that'll be, the 16th, Trev?
Yeah.
We're going to do our Notre Dame season predictions and our college football playoff predictions. Next Saturday, the bracket will finally be revealed. next Saturday, August 16th. So, but we're going to break down all 4 conferences next week. So we wanted to get the Notre Dame opponents knocked out this week. So you guys understand, but yeah, it's almost there.
And then a week from next Saturday, there's college football on.
Yes. And we're going to go live that Saturday morning, by the way, and we're going to do our we're going to have our bold prediction show, and may even preview some of the games that weekend at some point in time on our CFB Nation channel. You never know. You never know.
All the more reason to have that subscription button hit and that notification bell hit, so you guys know always when the Irish Breakdown podcast goes live. On your way out of here, be sure to hit that like button, whatever streaming platform you listen to us on. We would greatly appreciate a 5-star review. Brian and Sean will be back tomorrow for the RTCF show, and I believe IB Nation Sports Beat also goes live tonight at 5, so be sure to check out the guys. Multiple different ways to check them out. WSBT radio app right here on the Irish Breakdown YouTube channel, and I believe it's 960 AM radio and 107.6 FM. Might have to check myself on that. But until next time, that's Brian. I'm Trevor. We'll see you back here very soon on the Irish Breakdown podcast.